I get annoyed if we don't publish something new into the academy every single week. Because if you think about it from a customer perspective, in fact, take this from a different perspective. If you walk past a shop this week and there's nothing in the window that you like, and then next week you walk past the shop and there's still the same stuff in the window, you're not going to go in that shop. But if they've rotated the stock, if they added something new, actually, it might pique your interest, because we as marketers, for all the fancy words, the personas, all the jargon, all the avatars, all the customer research, all the data that we can analyze, all the fancy stuff we can put together, ultimately, we've got no idea what's going to stick. That's it. But bottom line. And just like a shop, we can make best guesses. So we put what we think is going to be our best piece in the shop window. And if it attracts people, we put more of that in there. If not, then we rotate it, we put something else in. So I think if you're not creating content every week, you're not rotating your shop window, and those people are just going to pass you by. They're going to keep on walking until they spot something in someone else's window that they're going to walk through the door and look at.
So you're a smart business committed to innovation, to service and to modern marketing, and you're asking, what's next? Wondering how you can become even more innovative. My name is Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and this is the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Hi innovators, it's that time of the week again. I hope you're as excited as I am to be back on another episode of the InnovaBuzz podcast. Yes, I'm really excited because today on the podcast, my guest is Mark Asquith of Excellence Expected. Love that title. Excellence Expected provides entrepreneurs with straight-talking, actionable advice to grow their business. Mark is also host of the 7-Minute Mentor podcast, a speaker and co-founder of podcast websites, and a frequent contributor to the Podcast Success Academy. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transformational Marketing Academy, a community of awesome coaches who are transforming their clients in highly impactful ways. The Transformational Marketing Academy is full of marketing tips and information, and I think you'll find the posts there really helpful, and I'd love to have your insights and input to add to the mix. You can join the Academy on LinkedIn by visiting innovabiz.co/TMAC. That's innovabiz.co/TMAC. There's no charge to join, and while you're at it, you might want to download our transformational marketing journey at innovabiz.co/TMMAP. In our discussion today, Mark talked to me about the importance of being entertaining in all your published content, because entertainment gets engagement, and the value of the content is much greater when the audience is engaged. We talked about doing what you're passionate about rather than what others expect. And we talked about the importance of having sound, well-documented processes. Without further ado, then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Mark Asquith. Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today, all the way from Sheffield in the UK, I believe, Mark Asquith, who's from Excellence Expected, where he provides entrepreneurs straight-talking, actionable advice to grow their business. Now, Mark is host of the Straight Talking Guide series. He's also host of the 7-Minute Mentor podcast, a speaker, co-founder of podcast websites, and a frequent contributor to the Podcast Success Academy. So welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Privileged to have you as a guest.
It's a pleasure. No, thank you very much for having me.
Now, Colin Gray, who was a guest on our podcast episode 131, suggested that we interview you and introduced us. So big hello to Colin.
Big shout out to Colin. And next time you speak to him, ask him about the karaoke in New York. That's a story.
Right. Okay. So was that at the podcast podcast, what was it he was headed off to?
Oh, Podcast Movement. That was prior to Podcast Movement. Yeah, Colin met me and my team over in New York prior to Podcast Movement. We had a random night in some random Japanese karaoke bar, which was very bizarre.
Right. Okay.
So it's and people say podcasting's boring.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to follow up on that one. Now, you also do some free coaching sessions on Facebook, 30-minute coaching sessions each week. So we'll have links to that on the show notes. And you're constantly developing innovative products in content, in marketing and podcasting space. So I'm really interested in exploring all of that a little bit further. Now, before we start talking about all things content, marketing, podcasting, innovation, and so on, let's find out a little bit more about you as a person. So when you were a young child, what did you want to do when you grew up?
Do you know what? I was one of those really weird people that didn't really know too much about what I didn't want to be like an astronaut or anything.
Yeah.
I can't remember genuinely what I wanted to be. The only thing I do remember is that I think I wanted to own a Porsche car when I was about 10. I was like, yeah, I want to get a Porsche. And that was it. Honestly, that's the only thing I can remember. Like, I was terrible at football, so I never wanted to do that. And then when I got to about 15, I think I wanted to kind of be a rock star for about 5 years. And then I realized that I was terrible. So I stopped with that as well, I should probably make a better story up. So I can always say, I can pretend that maybe I wanted to be an astronaut. We can tell people that if you like.
Okay. All right. We'll go with that one. So did you end up getting a Porsche then?
No, that's another story. Oh, that is another story. It's kind of an interesting origin story, because I got to the point when I was quite young that I could afford to get one. And then I realized that it would be silly to spend that amount of money on a vehicle. And that was like a coming of age for me at about 24, which was quite curious. But no, maybe maybe one day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these days you can rent one for a day or two and have a little bit of fun and then give it back. You don't have all the ongoing costs.
Yeah, exactly. It was one of those things, and we'll probably get onto this like when it comes to sort of background and so on, but I kind of got to 24 and just started earning loads of money just accidentally. And it was at the point then that I realized I could probably get one. And then I remember, actually, there's a place in Sheffield, a garage on the way to the cinema, and I went to look at one, and I was like, why would I want, what's the point in having this though? Like, I'd just spend all this money when I could invest it or do a little bit more with it. And it was a real eye opener for me, because I'd gotten to the point where I could get one and just decided not to, it was quite interesting, because that was always the benchmark of success for me, was that, the acquisition of that thing. And, at the point that I could get one, I decided against it. And it was, that was genuinely a bit of a turning point, actually, when it came to my mindset.
All right. So, I guess we'll go with the astronaut then. So where did you head? Where did you head off? So what do you do today, and why do you do it? Let's go with that.
So I own a software company with Kieran, my business partner, and we've got a team here in Sheffield. We build software for podcasters. So we started life as podcast websites where we had one digital product, one kind of web platform, WordPress-based web platform for podcasters. And that's expanded into a suite of different products. So we've got a number of products launching this year, but we've also got our Podcast Success Academy, which is our membership community. So we've got a suite of products and software for podcasters, and that's what I do in my day-to-day life. And my own brand, the Excellence Expected brand, is my personal brand, it's really more just me telling the story of how we're running this business. It's kind of a behind-the-scenes look at what we're doing. And I put that brand out there because I can say things under that brand that I wouldn't be able to say under the Podcast Websites brand. I can be a little bit more specific about my own part in the business versus, Podcast Websites putting out content that helps people. So that's what I spend my days doing, really, working on the software businesses and the products that we've got there, and then just creating, like you said earlier in the introduction, creating the 7-minute mentor and working on that content for my own side of things as well. So that's my day-to-day, really.
Okay. Now, when did you discover podcasting, and how did you kind of get into that, and how did you develop your skills in podcasting?
So I started my first ever podcast, actually. It was on the back of a blog that I created with a friend of mine, Gary Aylett. He runs the Big Blue Box Doctor Who podcast now, but we started a blog called Two Shots to the Head, which was it was kind of like a pop culture blog, but it actually morphed into a DC Comics blog, which is just something that I was always a big fan of. And that's got me into podcasting in early 2014 or late 2013. And, he just said, we should start a podcast. And I said to him, why would we do that? It sounds weird. Why would we do a podcast? It's not 2005 and Lost's not on TV anymore. So what the hell are we going to talk about? And, it was one of those things where he just convinced me to get the microphone, and we recorded the first episode, and it worked. People listened to it, and it baffled me. And from there, I just got really deeply into it. And then very quickly after starting my own show and my own personal brand, we created podcast websites. I'm talking, I had the idea for podcast websites like the same week that I launched my own podcast. So it was quite an accelerated dive into podcasting, because from then, late 2014, in fact, it will be 4 years in 20 days. International Podcast Day 2018 will mark 4 years of me being in podcasting. And since then I've recorded nearly 700 episodes, and I've created 4 podcasting products under the business and spoke at countless events. So yeah, it's fair to say that when I get into something, I really get into it.
Yeah. Well, I really like that you kind of started up your own podcast and then took the learnings out of all the bits and pieces that have to come together in building a podcast and built that out into a product where you help other people get into podcasting and do it well. So taking all the lessons you've learned from your own podcast, and then, like you say, the excellence expected brand gives you the opportunity to then kind of talk about the back scenes of the business and how you do that.
Yeah, and it's a good way to do that. I enjoy doing that. I'm actually going to be rebranding Excellence Expected in January. I'm going to be relaunching that as just markasquith.com, that just so that I've got a little bit less confusion, around people saying, well, what's this podcasting business and what's this other business? I want to make it very clear that actually this is me just talking about my thing. And I love the Excellence Expected brand, and I'll keep that, certainly keep all the domains and everything that goes alongside that, and keep the tagline that I've created and so on. But I just want to make it a lot clearer that actually, look, this is a little bit less of a business, even though it is a business. It does make money. It's not my focus, and I want to make that really clear for people, because I think that can sometimes be quite confusing.
Yeah. All right. Now, how did you develop your skills then around content marketing and branding and marketing in general that ended up landing you in podcasting as a core part of your business?
So I used to own a branding and digital agency. I did that for about 10 years. I used to own an agency called Hacksaw in Barnsley. And we sort of closed that down last year after about 12 years actually doing that. I set up, my first branding and digital business in 2005. We worked with all sorts of people from grassroots plumbers, and we worked with people like Bosch on websites for those guys, and brands and branding for those guys. And, we've done a lot of work in that space. I'd done, like I said, 12 years in that, and then decided to do, I guess, the same kind of thing, but in the podcasting space. But at the same time, I've always had a keen eye for marketing. I'm not, I don't really see myself as a marketer, even though that's kind of probably at the center of everything that I do. But I've also got a lot of knowledge and experience in branding, in design for web in particular, but also things like user experience, a lot of things around kind of software creation and ideation, and I've just got this really odd mix of skills because I've just been doing it for so long. I've worked in startups before, and I've kind of developed products before and built platforms before, and then obviously built brands before. So I've got this very bizarre mix of knowledge, which now has podcasting right at the center of it. I bring a lot of that knowledge into the podcasting world, which I think a lot of the time is actually quite missing. I think a lot of people in podcasting, especially the independents, they don't necessarily know about branding and marketing, and they don't necessarily know about design principles, and they don't know about how to build, business principles around their show. So yeah, that's how I got into it, just from doing it as part of my agency.
Yeah, I really like that. It's kind of an evolution, but in hindsight, it's a natural evolution, isn't it? Because I know you talk a lot about, in the podcasting space, about who's the ideal audience and how do you build an audience avatar or a customer avatar for your podcast. And that's kind of the start of every marketing journey in my mind. And you also talk about validating product ideas, which is kind of another early step in the marketing journey.
Yeah, there's so much to do. And I think particularly as a podcaster, I don't think people generally get that. A lot of people think, right, I'm going to do this podcast and that's it. If it fails, it fails. If it succeeds, it succeeds. But a lot of people don't realize that their first podcast is probably just them validating that they can do a podcast. That might not succeed. They might not even stick to it. A lot of people just bail on the first podcast, but realize that they like podcasting, but just don't like their original podcast. A lot of people do that. I did it with my show. I did 150 shows and then stopped because I was just getting bored of it. So it's one of those things where to validate the idea, you're not just validating it from a customer perspective, insofar as will people want this thing, but you're also validating it for yourself. Can I do this? Do I want to do this? Am I cut out for this? And, there's a lot of that work that goes on that people don't really see. And a lot of people get a little bit disgruntled if they do, if they think, maybe get 20 episodes into their show and think, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's fine. That's okay. You can move on to your next one. The idea is that you've probably just got the bug a little bit for recording something. And you might move into video. You might move into content creation in another format. You might move into live streaming. But either way, you've put a mic in front of yourself and decided that actually, I quite like doing this. So yeah, I think, that whole validation thing comes in two different guises, I think.
Now, I guess, there's a couple of questions that raises that I'd like to explore with you a little bit further. First of all, I guess, what would you say to somebody that's thinking about podcasting, hasn't quite jumped on board yet, would like to do it, but doesn't really know how to kind of get into it? First up, might be embarrassed about talking into a microphone, might be unsure of whether what they've got to say is of value to somebody, that nobody will listen. What would you say?
I think you've just got to do it for yourself. We did the DC Comics show as a completely self-indulgent show. Completely self-indulgent, because we just wanted to talk about DC Comics stuff. And, there was no other reason to do that other than we just liked it. But then we realized, we weren't getting many downloads, maybe 150, 200 per episode. But we were still getting the downloads. We were still getting people listening. And, suddenly we started getting comics sent to us in the post for review. And then, suddenly we started getting big artists that wanted interview. We had Scott Snyder that was going to be on the show before we stopped it, and people like Chula Latte that was going to be on the show. And, we'd spoken to people like Becky Cloonan. So these are all big names in the comic space. These are, for example, Scott Snyder's the guy that wrote a comic line that got adapted for the Gotham TV show. They're big players, and it just came from having this media outlet. We got tickets to Comic Cons, and we got tickets to events and behind the scenes things, and we just did that. It was self-indulgent. And I think that's what you've got to do. You've got to just start doing stuff for yourself. And then if it sticks, it sticks. But if not, at least then it's not going to turn into a job. 'Cause a lot of people do this thing and then it'll turn into a job for them because they've done it for the wrong reasons. And they think, oh my God, now I've got to record another interview. I've got to go and do another solo episode. And they don't actually want to do it. They just feel like they have to because they've said they're going to. Whereas if you do it for yourself, pick something that you like talking about, then it becomes easy because you just want to talk about what you want to talk about.
Yeah. That's great advice. Yeah. Pick something you want to talk about, pick something you like. And then I like your point about having a media outlet, and it really does give you a platform for connecting to people, for engaging with people, for getting to authorities in particular area, like your example of the comic things. And I've gone to shows or to exhibitions where I had no right to be there, and I wasn't in the industry, and they said, "Oh, why are you registering here, or why should we let you in?" And I said, "Well, I run an innovation podcast." So, "Oh, okay, so you're media," and get you in every time.
Oh, it really does. It really does, and it's James, our head of podcast relations here at Podcast Websites, he's got a beer podcast, and he's got some tickets for an industry level beer event in October, which is perfect. Yeah. And it's just, he's going in as the media, which you wouldn't ordinarily get that luxury. So it's great. But like I said, do it for your reasons. Do it for yourself. And then when you get the tickets to the festivals and the exhibitions and so on, actually you're going to go to them because you want to go. If you do a podcast because you think there's an opportunity to make some money in a niche that you don't really care about, that's not going to last long. Because you're not gonna be passionate about doing it, and you're gonna get the industry events coming up and giving you tickets and giving you media passes, and actually you're not going to want to go because you're just not engaged by it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it's like any business, isn't it? If you're not passionate or engaged about it, it becomes a chore or a job.
Exactly that.
All right. Now I see. I mentioned earlier that you do a live Facebook video kind of masterclass once a week. How long have you been doing live video for? And talk to us a little bit about the power of video as opposed to podcasting.
So I've done that live stream, Free Coaching Friday. It's 4 p.m. UK time every single Friday. And I probably have 2 weeks off that every single year. I do Christmas and then maybe have a holiday where I don't do it. But otherwise, I'm there every single Friday. And I've been doing that for 18 months now. So I don't know how many is that. What's that? 50 times, that's 75 shows. So I've done that a lot of times. And it's very, very interesting because that's my only call to action. I mean, most people, like on a show like this, people say, well, where can we find you online? And ordinarily I'd say, right, go to my website, or ordinarily I'd say, right, go to Podcast Success Academy, whatever. I'd give them a call to action to do something. But actually now what I'll do is I'll say, well, just come along to the free coaching. And it's really, really powerful because there's no risk in that for people. And that's, I think, what the power of live video is, because there's no risk for people. And I'm giving people value, 30, 35 minutes every single Friday. And I answer questions. People pre-submit questions to me. I'll get people showing me and asking me questions on the day. And, it's not a huge audience. I probably max out at 40 people. But that's 40 people every single week that turn up. And it's not always the same 40 people. You've got your core audience, your big advocates that turn up to everything that you do. And then you've got 1 or 2 new people every single week. And a lot of people say, well, that's not enough. Well, fair enough. If you're running a business and you're marketing, you want more than 2-3 people a week. But for a live stream to a personal brand that it's completely free, and it's not costing me anything to do this, to aggregate 2-3 new people every single week and do that 50 times a year, that's not actually, it's not an inconsiderable amount of new people coming through. But the really cool thing, and this is where podcasting wins as well, but live video in particular I think wins here, is that you've got real-time interaction and you've got people that have tuned in. Like, this is not passive, it's not accidental that they've come to this live stream. They've done it on purpose. So these people are really engaged in what you're telling them. And they're really wanting to get involved. It's not like, getting 1,000 people on an email list and only 50 being engaged or getting really bad click-through rates. Actually, you get 40 people on a live stream. All 40 of them have chosen from that real crazy mix and that really huge number of kind of noisy videos and audio pieces and adverts on their Facebook timeline. They've chosen to click your video and come to see you live. So it's not poor quality traffic. It's really good quality, highly engaged traffic. And that's where it becomes a big win. In my opinion, that's the power of what live video is. It's very quick, high quality engagement where you wouldn't ordinarily get it.
And you run it as a Q&A, or do you have kind of topics or themes that you work through?
Well, kind of just depending on what mood I'm in. So what I sometimes do, so generally speaking, what I'll do is I'll pick 3 questions that have been sent to me over the previous weeks, and I'll answer them in a very, very specific format. So that's good for pre-marketing. I can send it out to my email list saying this week I'm going to talk about creating FOMO for your events, how to boost your podcast downloads, and how to validate your startup idea. I'll talk about those 3 things. But in between that, I'll intersperse it with, look, here's what content I've got coming up. Here's what's coming up at podcast websites or the Success Academy. Here's what I've been up to. Here's what you can expect from me over the next couple of weeks. Here's what you can look forward to. Here's any announcements that I've got. But also, I actually use it as a massive behind the scenes. I do it at 4 p.m. on a Friday. that's not by accident. That's my last thing that I do on a week before I break for the weekend. So I just have a laugh with it, and people really like seeing that behind the scenes. I had my little nephew come in a couple of weeks ago. He's just a little terror, so he comes in and everyone likes it. And, you see other people in the office, you see behind the scenes. If I do it at home in the home studio, you see all that. And people just like to get to know you a little bit. So I will script it to a degree. Well, not script it. I never script it, but I will have a format where I'm going to answer the 3 questions. But often, so I was away a couple of weeks ago. I went away and I still did my free coaching on the Friday, but I was just in London. I was under Tower Bridge. I was having a pint, having a drink, and I just did my free coaching from there and just said, look, I'm on vacation, but actually here's behind the scenes. And people really liked that. So the reason that I'm mentioning that, I know that's quite a digressive answer to the question, but the reason that I'm answering it like that is that a lot of people get hung up on, I've got to set a format, and sure you can, and yes, you can script it. There's nothing wrong with that, but equally, there's nothing wrong with just going live and showing people behind the scenes.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that.
I really like that concept because it's kind of like, and you mentioned, having a beer during vacation, but it's kind of like the beer o'clock concept, right? Last thing of a Friday, get together with a few network friends and have a drink and socialise and shoot the breeze. What's going on during the week, or what happened during the week? What are the big challenges? What did you learn, and so on. So it's kind of the online version of that, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And people do turn up from all over the world. I mean, a lot of my audience is in the US, so I'll get a lot of UK people coming in, but I'll also get a lot of people, and it's 11 a.m. Eastern time for them. So they're coming up to their lunchtime, or it's 8 a.m. Pacific time. So they'll be, they're just getting ready to go into work. And it's interesting. It's interesting, the mix of people that you get. And it is, you do get it's interesting to see the same people turning up every single week. You've got Felicia and Jess and Steve and Bruce and Raf and, Dave and all these different people that are turning up every single week. And they do turn up every week. And it's interesting because they've built it into their schedule as well. And I think that's a real key part of this, with number one, live video, but also podcasting. And do you know what? Anything in content marketing, it's just that consistency. Like a lot of the time they will set their schedules around my free coaching on Fridays. They won't book anything at 11 a.m. Eastern because they know they want to be on my session, which, that's the biggest compliment you can get.
It is, isn't it? Now, one of the things that you've kind of implied a little bit, but I think it's important to point out, is that people only will do that if there's exceptional value being delivered, right? So tell us a little bit about that. How do you ensure that whatever it is that you put out there, whether it's through live video or through the 7-minute podcast series, whether, how do you ensure that that's going to be exceptionally valuable?
Well, I think also let's just kind of take a step back from that for just one sec. I think we always get a little bit hung up on value. Yes, we've got to provide value. There's no doubt about that. But remember that video was invented for entertainment purposes. And so was audio. What was audio used for in the 30s and the 40s? It was for the serials and for the news. It was information and value in the form of the news, but also music and the old Superman TV radio shows and the War of the Worlds and, that kind of, like the Archers, in the UK, Radio 2 or Radio 4, whatever. It's been going longer than I've been alive. And it's a season of entertainment. And I think that's what we sometimes forget, is that it's also just all right to turn up and entertain people. So you've got to add value. But I mean, when it comes to the 7-Minute Mentor podcast, what I do with that is there's a reason it's 7 minutes, because I know I can hit people in the face with some value very quickly, but they're not going to spend too long with me. They're not going to spend all the day with me. So I think when it comes to value, you've just got to really be consistent with what you're putting out. If you've got an opinion on something, then you've got to really form that opinion, and you've got to articulate that opinion. And if you're adding value in the form of like a Q&A, or you're giving tutorials away, you can't go superficial. There's a lot of people online just going superficial. Like there's an online entrepreneur that I know, and a couple of years ago I used to really love what they did, and now I'm a little bit like, well, you've not really said anything new for the last 3 years. You've not said anything different. You're not getting into the detail. You're just saying inspirational guff, and that's not valuable, So you've got to go deep. You've got to tell people the specifics. And that's how you can add value, tell people the specifics. But at the same time, if it's live streaming or things like that, don't be afraid to just turn it on and just have a good time and to show people behind the scenes and show people what's going on in your business, or show people how you're building your products out, or some of the challenges that you've got. Because entertainment is as valuable as actual value. There's a reason that most of the TV, we don't watch TV to get value. We watch it to be entertained. No one's watching Daredevil to get value. They're watching Daredevil to watch some guy in a suit dive off rooftops and beat people up. It's so you can't be afraid of just being an entertainer with that. And that, I think that represents a big shift in a lot of the marketing that businesses need to be doing now, because this is all about innovation. And I think many of the most innovative marketers and business people out there that are really doing well, they are actually embracing entertainment, and they're not just adding value, but they're doing it in such an entertaining way. And, I think there's a very, very tangible difference between people like your accountants and your solicitors and your builders and your local kind of smaller businesses who aren't really getting that. If you imagine a plumber creating entertaining, engaging content in your area, like that guy would clean up. But no one does it. They just don't do it because it doesn't feel like marketing to them. But then you've got these kind of online entrepreneurial people and startups that are all about that. They're all about entertainment marketing. And there is a very big tangible gap between people, the kind of businesses that get this and the businesses that don't. So, back to the question, how do you add value? Well, you've got to decide if you want to add value, or are you just turning up and entertaining people? Because that's all right as well. People, the old classic, people buy from people. You've got to be seen to be a person to be bought from.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really good points in that. And I think you mentioned engagement, and one of the things that I think agendas engagement a lot is actually being entertaining. And so, as you say, the people that get that are doing really well. It brings up a question also about the power of telling stories in your marketing. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I know you're very strong on that. And entertainment is a lot telling stories, isn't it?
Oh, hugely. There's a famous Plato quote that's famous that I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I can't remember it. But I believe it's those who tell stories rule the world. I think that is actually the quote. And it's Plato seemed to know what he was doing. And it's interesting. There's a lot of books out there at the minute, a very famous one, which is becoming a story brand. It's not, a lot of people struggle with this. This is not anything new. It's not anything new. When we get drunk, what do? We tell stories of the golden years. We tell nostalgic stories, or Chinese whispers exists for a reason, because we like stories to be better. We like them to be more entertaining. We like myths and legends, and we like the hero's journey, the rise, the fall, and the subsequent redemption. We like the Luke Skywalkers, or the even recently, the people like the Tiger Woods of the world who had a massive fall from. Like, we love stories, we love entertainment, and we love seeing people that are struggling and being redeemed from that. And a lot of people really struggle with their marketing and tying that in. But you're right, stories are really, really valuable. And the way that you can really start to integrate that into your business is just look at, actually, why did you even start doing what you were doing? If you are a builder or you're an accountant, like, why did you start up what you were doing? And a lot of people will struggle with that. A lot of people will start to say things like, well, I just wanted to work for myself. Like, well, that's actually not the case. There must have been something that annoyed you that much that you didn't want to do it anymore. Or you must have had an opinion that strong about something that you thought you could fix it. Or, you saw something going wrong or being handled incorrectly, and you couldn't let that happen. So you set something up to fix it. We've all got a reason for doing it. And that's the story that you start with. It doesn't have to be well crafted. You don't have to even be a storyteller. You just, there's a difference between telling a story and being a well-rounded storyteller, just like there's a difference between singing and being a singer, or golfing and being a golfer. There's a big difference between those two things. So I think a lot of people in marketing, they kind of rush through things, and a lot of people in business, they rush through things. It's all about getting stuff out the door. We pat ourselves on the back when we put something out, because then we can move on to the next thing. And then we pat ourselves on the back when that leaves the building and we've published it, and we move on to the next thing. So it becomes about volume. It's not about quality. And I think if you can focus on telling well-crafted stories and releasing maybe slightly less content, but really hitting it home and releasing really well-rounded pieces of content that do tell stories. And it doesn't have to be your story. We might be educating people on, download statistics for podcasts at podcast websites. But actually, we're not just going to deliver the information. We're going to weave a story around it. We're going to tell the story of a real person and give their example and really craft it. So it's not just about telling your stories. It's just about being mindful that people are going to be more engaged if they can buy into something, if they can believe it, if they can relate to it, if it's going to evoke some connection or some emotion, they're going to get it. Whereas we don't do that. We just want to move on to the next piece of content, We just get on this hamster wheel,
Yeah. So do you have a structure or framework that you use when you're putting together content to incorporate a story and kind of weave it into a coherent message?
So we've got not really any framework for developing a story, because I think that is reliant on the specific type of content that you want to create. Are you trying to be technically informative? Are you trying to be generalizing your information? Or are you actually doing something more along the lines of entertaining? I think that, I think that the type of outcome that you're trying to achieve with your content will dictate how you put that story together. But I think as long as you're mindful that you need to be telling a story and you've got some basic storytelling knowledge of how to put that together, like I study a lot of how to write, people like Stephen King on writing. I've got a couple of more kind of technical learning books on how to be a better writer. I think everyone and every marketer should be studying that sort of stuff. When it comes to developing content, we have developed internally at podcast websites, we've got our content development process that we use for where we take a piece of content, we'll look at what value it's going to add to the audience, we'll look at what the monetization logic is going to be for that, we'll look at what the retention logic is going to be, like what our current customers going to get from this. We'll look at what alternate format can we put out. So if it's a blog post, could we maybe also create a case study or a quiz or a video or a podcast or something around it? And then we'll create a content upgrade for that. And we'll use kind of a framework to create that upgrade and then put that into the Podcast Success Academy. So we really try and bleed as much out of one piece of content as we can, and we've developed that process internally. It's always developing; it needs work. It's still not functioning at 100%, but it is working. So we've got that process that we've developed, and it's effective. There's no doubt about that. It's effective, but it's about having the right ideas in the first place as well. That's a big challenge.
Mm-hmm. So developing a content strategy around what, first of all, what the audience wants, who the audience is, what the audience wants, and then consistency, I think, was something you mentioned earlier as well.
Oh, gotcha.
Consistency and quality rather than volume.
Yeah, and I think you've got to balance that out. We try to publish. Like I get annoyed if we don't publish something new into the academy every single week, because if you think about it from a customer perspective, in fact, take this from a different perspective. If you walk past a shop this week and there's nothing in the window that you like, and then next week you walk past the shop and there's still the same stuff in the window, you're not going to go in that shop. But if they've rotated the stock, if they added something new, actually, it might pique your interest, because we as marketers, for all the fancy words, the personas, all the jargon, all the avatars, all the customer research, all the data that we can analyze, all the fancy stuff we can put together, ultimately, we've got no idea what's going to stick. That's it. But bottom line. And just like a shop, we can make best guesses. So we put what we think is going to be our best piece in the shop window. And if it attracts people, we put more of that in there. If not, then we rotate it, we put something else in. So I think if you're not creating content every week, you're not rotating your shop window, and those people are just going to pass you by. They're going to keep on walking until they spot something in someone else's window that they're going to walk through the door and look at. And that's very, very important. You can't rest on your laurels and say, okay, look, we've decided that our approach is going to be, we'll put something out once a month. That's fine, but people don't shop once a month. Yeah. If you are willing to have one bite at the cherry every single month, that's cool. That's your decision. But don't be surprised if you don't get the volume of people that you expect. And if you do that, then you better make sure that you've got a really good budget and some really good tactics for actually getting that out to people for 3-4 weeks solid. You're marketing that one piece of content for 3 and 4 weeks, which again is not always a bad thing, but you've got to make sure that is a really good piece of content. So you just got to pick your tactic and pick which way you're going to go. But generally speaking, I was saying it to the team earlier, it's better to get something really good out often than it is to get something perfect out infrequently. That's the key thing.
Yeah, that's a great answer to a question I often get, which is how often should you publish content, or how often should you publish a blog post, or so on. And usually I say that depends a little bit, but I go into a little bit more detail there. But that's a great answer. I think I'm going to start quoting you on that.
Good, that's all right. Yeah, we can all learn from that sort of stuff, I think. And I forget that as well. There's definitely no harm in reminding ourselves of that as well. I think we sometimes forget that.
All right. Well, this is wonderful, Mark. I really could go on for ages talking on podcasting and content marketing and entertainment as well, and finding this quite entertaining. But I think it's time we moved on to the Buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's designed to help our audience who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions. Hopefully we'll get some really insightful answers that will inspire everyone to go and do something awesome today.
Let's do this. Yeah, sounds fun.
Yeah. So number 1 is what is the number 1 thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Do you know what I think you've got to do? You've got to trust your own gut. Okay, you've got to understand that your industry probably better than you think, and you've sometimes got to just push stuff out and do stuff that other people won't quite get yet. Okay, and that's what we try and do with our products. It's what we try and do with our services and our platform. But also think bigger picture. People like Steve Jobs. The world was completely off tablet computers. No one wanted a tablet computer, and then the iPad came out and things went crazy. And it's because, it's the old Henry Ford quote, if I'd have given people what they wanted, I'd have built faster horses. And it's simply something that we all need to learn, is just to trust our gut a little bit more. We know our industry, and to be innovative, we've sometimes just got to put something out there with the understanding that it might fail. But actually, we probably know that it won't. We're just a little bit worried that it might do. So get it out there, see if it sticks, and if it does, winner. If not, you move on to the next thing. No harm, no foul. So that, I think the key to innovation is a lot of the time trusting your own knowledge in your industry, and believing that if you've got a problem, or if you wish something existed, there will be other people that wish the same thing.
That's great advice, and a couple of great examples there. And I think, I can't remember who said this recently, but that the biggest hurdle or biggest barrier to innovation is the fear of failure. So, yeah,
hugely, and we're all scared of that. And remember, that's an ego thing. We've got to learn to get over our ego. Forget your ego.
Yeah, get over yourself.
Yeah, exactly. If you fall on your backside, who cares? At least you've tried. Those people judging you aren't trying. Forget them. Who cares about them?
Yeah, it's a bit like learning to ski, isn't it? You sort of spend a lot of time falling on your backside, and you still have a lot of fun doing it. So you'd be at a loss having not tried that.
Exactly that. Perfect example.
All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas or new products? Have
time off and not do anything. And just let your brain kind of percolate around and see things in a different light. And, if you can look too closely at what you're doing and sometimes miss things. So I think you need a little bit of space. You need a little bit of time away, or you need to be around different people that make you think differently. If you are having the time and you're convinced that that's not right for you, then get around different people. That's the best thing that you can do, whether it's industry events, whether it's just going to meetups, whether it's reading different things or listening to different podcasts or audiobooks or live streams or YouTube channels, whatever it is, just get around different people. But I would always recommend get yourself some space, take some time, and just have a long weekend. Just go and sit and think, and just go and read some books that aren't related to work. And your brain will, when it's ready, it will start to give you ideas. That's what it does.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I've had, variants of that advice by a lot of people recently, from, the neuroscientist Dr. Fiona Kerr I can't remember what episode it was now, but she talks about, giving yourself space to daydream so that you can, so that the brain actually has that chance to percolate new ideas from the subconscious up to the surface. And, getting out into a different environment too has come up before. So great advice. All right. What's your favorite tool or system for improving your own productivity and allowing you to be more innovative?
So from a technical side of things, I'm a really big on processes. Like I'm a firm believer in building systems out and, taking something that you take for granted and that you do repeatedly and actually making a system and a process out of it so that other people can do it with you or do it for you or you can do it for them. Even down to the kind of minutiae of just publishing a blog post. I think if you can just get systems in place, you stop being, or you can start to stop being the bottleneck in your business. It's not as easy as it sounds, but that's the big thing for me. And I use Process Street for that, and it's got its foibles. Don't get me wrong; it's got its little kind of little bits of odd behavior. But Process Street, I think anyone can use that one and just build out a systems book for their entire business. Which means that if you want, if you start to scale the business, or if you start to introduce new team members or different types of team members, you can start to use that to just give them a playbook for the day to day. So Process Street, I think, is superb for that.
Yeah, great advice. So I'm a huge systems and processes fan. I have been ever since I can remember, and I think you're right. Documenting processes and being able then to hand off or have somebody step in for you when you do take time off and give yourself that space you talked about earlier. I've just had an experience where I've taken 5 weeks off and the business just ticked along as normal because we had those systems and processes in place. So, yeah, great advice. And Process Street definitely is a good tool to document that and have it available basically in a team intranet where everybody can access it. So we'll link to that in the show notes and people can check it out. Okay, what's the best way to keep a project or a client on track?
You've got to be a bit brutal with what you include. So you can't include everything. Things are going to slip because ideas never stop. So the more you add, the more it's going to slip ultimately. So you've got to be a bit brutal with what goes in there. So when we're building a big project out internally, we've not done this for a while because we've been doing little bits of kind of extra upgraded dev on some of the products. But when we build a big version of a piece of software, we usually go through a Moscow process, which is, okay, this software must have these things. It should have these things. It could have these things, but it won't have these things. And you prioritize in that order. So must have, should have, could have, and won't have, and you go through that process. And that's the best way to keep everything on track and just say, look, where does this fit in? Where does all this stuff fit together? And that's going to keep you on track as best you can. It's not easy to do that, but you've got to be brutal about what gets included. It's the cardinal sin otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a fair bit of discipline involved in that, though, isn't there? And making sure that what you've defined as should or could doesn't kind of suddenly become a must by osmosis or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to also understand who in a project is going to stamp their feet and have a little cry, because they're usually the people that expedite moving a should and a could into the must just because they want their own way. Identify those people quick and learn how to work with them. That's the way to do it.
All right. Great advice. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
I think you've got to lean on that entertainment factor. You've truly, I know it sounds cheesy and everyone says this, you've got to be yourself, but then you've got to learn how to use that in an entertainment kind of guise. You've got to stand out somehow. And the only way to stand out is to attract people who like you. And that is it. So try and, what are your little foibles? What are your little quirks? What are your little personality traits that no one else quite understands? And what's gonna, what are the things that you like doing? Like one of my biggest fans, Felicia Jones, we started talking about DC Comics about 4 years ago, and she's been a great big fan ever since. She gets involved in everything that I do. And it's for that very reason. So, you've got to just share things about you that you think aren't valuable because they probably are. So just, use yourself as the entertainment piece and add your value by proxy of doing that. And I think honestly, I think that's one of the only ways to stand out. If you are a smaller business, I think that's the only way to do it without a huge budget.
All right. That's excellent advice. So learning to use your own personality as entertainment factor to stand out.
Exactly that.
So you mentioned earlier that you were rebranding the Excellence Expected website and other assets to your personal brand. So what's the future for the business then in the light of that?
Well, to be honest, I don't really do much through my personal brand business. That's more, I do a little bit of coaching and consulting, a little bit of things like sponsorship for my podcast and, speaking at events and so on. But really the main focus is the software business. It's that's the future of what I'm doing is building up the audio software business and doing what I can do on that front. So yeah, I mean, that the personal brand is just there as a way of me, having a bit of a creative outlet for my own musings and like I said, earning a little bit of revenue that allows me to travel to some of the conferences that I go to and spend a bit of time in some of the cities that will then feed back into the software business. So it's honestly don't have any big plans for the personal branded stuff. It really is, batten down the hatches on the software side.
The software, yeah. So what's on the horizon with the software business?
Oh, all sorts of stuff. We've got another couple of products launching this month. There's one in podcasting, which is very exciting. I can't tell anyone anything about it yet because we're going through a little bit of patent work at the minute, but that's at productivity.com. You can sign up for a pre-launch invite on that one. It's getting very busy over there. So yeah, go and get an invitation, productivity.com. And then we've got another couple of things coming out, but we've just launched our Podcast Success Academy, which is for anyone that wants to even consider starting a podcast, or even if you are a podcaster, we help you move up from a podcaster into an audio influencer in your niche. So yeah, podcastsuccessacademy.com is the most recent thing that we've launched.
Yeah. All right. So we'll have links to both of those in the show notes. I think the Podcast Academy I found, but the other one might not be that easy to find without the link. So what's the number one piece of advice you'd give to any business owner who wants to be a leader and in innovation and in productivity?
I think when it comes to, if you want to lead in innovation and productivity, you've got to just, that innovation and productivity, it's a funny one, that, because you need kind of different traits for those two things. I think productivity, you've got to have discipline and focus and understand what's vital, and you've got to really make decisions quickly. That's the thing that I'd say in the productivity side, is learn to make decisions quickly and just move through things. When it comes to things like innovation, you've got to decide, how do you want to innovate? Is it through content? Is it through creation of products and services? But either way, you've just got to start to, like I said earlier, you've got to trust your gut and create things that matter to people in your industry. And you've got to be confident that you know your industry well enough. So start creating some consistent content that will allow you to get feedback from that industry, whether it's something like the free coaching, or whether it's a podcast or a live stream or a YouTube channel. Just do something that puts you in front of people in the industry you want to help, and then listen to the feedback that you get and just act on the feedback. That's the key thing, act on the feedback. And that, other people will say it's innovation, you'll feel like it's common sense. And that's a good indicator.
Yeah. Well, sometimes common sense is not so common, is it?
True that.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great, Mark. Thanks a lot. Where can people reach out and say thank you for what you've shared with us today?
The easiest way is actually just come to the free coaching. So just do a search for Excellence Expected or my name, Mark Asquith, and click the free coaching tab. The link to that is excellence-expected.com/free coaching. Just come along to the session anytime. It's there every Friday.
Yep. Well, you did say that was going to be the call to action. So there we have it. And we'll have a link to that in the show notes, of course. Now, finally, who would you like me to interview on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
I think you should probably interview, well, there's a few people I can think of, but I'm going to say probably my co-founder, Kieran McKeever, just because he does a lot of work in tech innovation. He does a lot of work in kind of giving people what they want without them really kind of knowing. We build a lot of tools to that end. So I think it's nice to sometimes see behind the curtain on what that can look like for people. So I think a lot of people have got great ideas, but they don't know what it takes to implement them. So I think it'd be a great chat for you.
All right. Sounds fascinating. So Kieran, look out for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Mark Asquith. So thanks so much for sharing your time and insights with us today, Mark. I've really enjoyed this immensely. It's been very entertaining and educational, so I hope the audience also finds that as well. So all the best for the future, and for the new product, I'll have to check that one out, and let's keep in touch.
Sounds perfect. Thank you so much.
Wasn't that fun? I hope you enjoyed meeting Mark and took away some actionable items from the great tips he shared with us today. I particularly loved his explanation about regularly publishing content and how often you should publish. That's something that I get asked so much, and I always struggle a little bit with the answer. So I'm going to steal Mark's answer shamelessly and use that. Now, I'd love to know what you took away from Mark's interview. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Mark Asquith. That is MarkAsquith. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Mark Asquith. You'll also find contact information for contacting Mark directly there, as well as links to the resources that we spoke about. Mark suggested I interview his business partner, Kieran McCaffrey of Podcast Websites, on a future InnovaBuzz podcast. So Kieran, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Mark Asquith. Remember to visit innovabiz.co/TMAC, TMAC, to join our Transformational Marketing Academy and access all of its marketing tips and information. Stay connected. Head on over to iTunes or Stitcher or Pocket Casts and subscribe to the InnovaBuzz podcast so you make sure you'll never miss another episode. We'd also love you to leave us a review, because what you think matters. Take some of the ideas you've heard today and apply them in your business. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions or questions, share them in the comments below the blog post. And remember, if you want to get better marketing results than you ever have, join our fantastic LinkedIn community at the Transformational Marketing Academy. All you have to do is go to innovabiz.co/TMAC. It's free to join. Hope to see you there soon. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember to be awesome and keep innovating.